As the dawn of Italy's most powerful mafia family, my father adopted two orphan brothers to serve as bodyguards for my sister and me. The older one, tall, broad-shouldered, and watchful, fell for my sister the moment he saw her. That left me with his autistic, younger brother. I didn't have the heart to send Edward back to the orphanage, where he'd surely be bullied, so I kept him. He never spoke, so I took him to the best psychiatrist money could buy. I spent 2 hours every day telling him jokes, even though he never once cracked a smile. He couldn't protect me, so I taught myself martial arts and begged my father not to cast him out. I thought he was just deeply traumatized, that with enough patience he'd come around. Then the cruise ship went down. He tore the last life jacket straight off my body. The first words he ever said to me, "Sorry, but Bianca's life jacket is defective." Bianca, my sister. He watched me slip beneath the waves, gripping my hand one last time. "I failed you in this life. I'll make it up to you in the next." Turns out his silence was never autism, just an act, one he only kept up around me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day we chose our bodyguards. This time, I skipped the bodyguard farce entirely, decided to live my own life. But now it seems I've caught the eye of someone far more dangerous. Serena's POV. As the dawn of Italy's most powerful mafia family, my father adopted two orphan brothers to serve as bodyguards for my sister and me. The older one, tall, broad-shouldered, and watchful, fell for my sister the moment he saw her. That left me with his autistic, younger brother. I didn't have the heart to send Edward back to the orphanage, where he'd surely be bullied, so I kept him. He never spoke, so I took him to the best psychiatrist money could buy. I spent 2 hours every day telling him jokes, even though he never once cracked a smile. He couldn't protect me, so I taught myself martial arts and begged my father not to cast him out. I thought he was just deeply traumatized, that with enough patience he'd come around. Then the cruise ship went down. He tore the last life jacket straight off my body. The first words he ever said to me, "Sorry, but Bianca's life jacket is defective." Bianca, my sister. He watched me slip beneath the waves, gripping my hand one last time. "I failed you in this life. I'll make it up to you in the next." Turns out his silence was never autism, just an act, one he only kept up around me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day we chose our bodyguards. I froze in my father's office, staring at the two brothers. Bianca glanced at me and bit her lip. "Actually, I'll take Edward. Serena should have Donald. She needs the stronger protector." She stepped away from Donald's hulking frame toward his younger brother. Donald's face fell instantly. I stayed frozen, processing this twisted déjà vu. Last time around, I'd fallen hard for Bianca's Oscar-worthy performance. When she'd offered to switch bodyguards, I actually thought she was being selfless, trying to give me the better option. Right until our yacht sank. Bianca had wept prettily as they strapped my life vest onto her. Never mind that Donald was a certified lifeguard, or that there was a damn lifebuoy floating right beside her. Classic Bianca. All performative resistance, zero actual sacrifice. But this time I shrugged. Fine by me. Bianca paled. She'd been so sure I'd say no. Edward stared at me too, his eyes filled with confusion and shock. "Absolutely not." Dad cut in. "You're the Ferrari heiress. Your safety is what matters most. This boy has severe autism. He can barely function, let alone protect you." I smiled. So he'd known about Edward's condition all along. But he'd still brought the younger brother here for us to choose from. This whole selection process was just for show. But maybe. Bianca quietly exhaled in relief, dabbing at her eyes as she started to speak, but Edward interrupted. "I can talk." My head jerked up in shock. Edward, the guy who hadn't said a word to me in 7 years, was actually talking now. When our eyes met, I saw that calculating look, too mature for his age, and I finally knew for certain he'd been reborn too. So much for his dying promise to make it right. Even with his second chance, he was still trying to ditch me, huh? Little did he know, I'd already written him out of my story. "My combat skills can be tested," Edward continued smoothly. "Oh, I bet he could." After I died, my spirit had watched him fight off sharks with nothing but a broken spear, keeping Bianca alive until rescue arrived. How pathetic that I'd spent my past life learning martial arts, terrified Dad would send this helpless little bodyguard back to the orphanage. Sure enough, once Edward stopped pretending, it took him exactly 3 moves to put our nationally ranked trainer flat on his ass. Dad's resolve began to crumble. The disappointed expression on Bianca's face completely vanished. Between the brothers, Edward had always been the more handsome one. If not for the autism, Bianca would have chosen him from the start. "Fine then. Edward will serve you. And Donald, I'm entrusting you with Serena." Hearing that, Donald shot me a look, his gaze lingering on the scar across my cheek with obvious disgust. Then he dropped to his knees. Sir, I'd rather return to foster care. Serena's POV. Dad's brow furrowed. You'd rather go back to eating scraps than take 50 grand a month? Donald didn't bother hiding his disgust at my scarred face. I'm not qualified to protect Miss Ferrari, sir. I sighed. Ever since I got these scars at 10 trying to save Bianca, this face had been nothing but a source of revulsion for everyone. Maybe that's why Edward treated me like garbage in our past life too. Donald, you can't abandon my sister. Bianca frantically grabbed his arm, trying to pull him to his feet. Donald looked at her with pure adoration. I didn't come here for her. I remained silent. Bianca's momentary triumph vanished behind a practiced pout. No. This is outrageous. I won't allow you to go back there. Easy fix. I cut in. Bianca can just keep both brothers. Problem solved. Bianca's cheeks flushed. What are you even saying? Both Cross brothers were gorgeous, and I knew Bianca's eyes had been glued to them since they walked through the door. Dad looked thoughtful. You really don't want either of them? Nah, I'm not into either of those guys. Both brothers stared at me, probably wondering what gave me the right to be so picky. Edward's expression was more complex, like there was something deeper than just confusion. Whatever. Not my problem anymore. Can you even guarantee your own safety? Probably can't. I shrugged. Dad blinked in surprise. So, just ship me off to my brother Stephen. He's got a whole security team. In my past life, I'd poured every ounce of my being into Edward. The family business? An afterthought. Bianca and I weren't treated the same way at all. Sure, Dad always said he loved us equally, but when it came to trust funds, those were all reserved for Bianca and my older brother Stephen. Stephen was out there building his empire, making the family trust grow by millions every year. Bianca's annual dividends alone could set up 10 families for life. Meanwhile, I had to practically beg Dad for money to cover Edward's medical bills. If I wanted any real power in this family, I'd have to earn it myself. Stephen hadn't even met me once and just had his assistant throw me some meaningless position and forgot I existed. Fine by me. I wasn't here for his approval anyway. Throwing myself into work, I shocked even myself with how good I was at this shit. After I landed that impossible Castellano account, Stephen finally agreed to see me. He threw me a belated welcome dinner and actually started giving me real projects. The company was hitting some major roadblocks, and even if he preferred Bianca, he had no choice but to acknowledge me now. Gradually, my reputation in the business world started growing faster than Bianca's Instagram following. Then one day, she stopped me at home. Serena, darling, don't you think you're being excessive? You're everywhere these days, making headlines, doing interviews. I'm not trying to be mean, but this sudden success feels more like luck than skill. If you screw things up later, it'll lose the whole family's face. Plus, with your scars and all this attention-seeking, no man's ever gonna want you. Then she glanced meaningfully toward Edward. Why don't you stop bothering Stephen? I'll mentor you instead. I cut straight to the point. You're just scared I'm stealing your spotlight, aren't you? Serena's POV. Bianca froze. Bianca, what gives you the right to tell me to stay in my place? The family's pampered princess, the trust fund shareholder? You're the one always sitting pretty on unearned privilege. Who are you to lecture me about not fighting for what's mine? You. Her eyes reddened instantly. Serena, Her eyes filled with crocodile tears on cue. But I wasn't done. And since you brought up my scar, let's talk about how I got it. Do you remember what you did to me when we were 10? I was trying to help you stop that attacker, and if you hadn't pushed me, how would I have ended up crashing right into him? How would my face have gotten ruined? That's not, I never meant, she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks like she was the victim here. Save the waterworks. You got what you wanted, the pretty face, the money, the perfect life. Just be good and continue to be Daddy's little princess. I turned to leave, but she started sobbing, her voice breaking. It wasn't like that, Serena. I was just worried about you. How can you think so little of me? Each tear hit the marble floor like she was performing for the Met Opera. That's enough. Donald, who had been following behind Bianca the whole time, immediately pulled her into his arms. You've crossed a line, Serena. Bianca clutched his shirt, shaking her head weakly. No, it's okay. I'm fine, really, I'm fine. Her shoulders trembled. Edward's eyes flickered with something like pity. Then he looked at me in cold. You really did go too far. Apologize. Excuse me? You heard me. Apologize to Bianca. Smack. My palm struck his face before anyone could react. Bianca gasped, immediately stepping between us. Serena, how could you hit him? I flexed my fingers, satisfaction warming my chest. Maybe you should train your dogs better, Bianca. They seem confused about who's the owner and who's the pet. You. Donald started forward, but I was already walking away. I was planning to pack my shit and move out that night, get as far away from Bianca and her devoted puppies as possible. But at 6 a.m., someone started pounding on my bedroom door like the house was on fire. Donald didn't wait for permission. The second I cracked the door, he grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. Bianca's been kidnapped. You're coming with me.
Now.
Serena's POV. Thankfully, all those self-defense classes paid off. I twisted out of Donald's grip and shoved him back. Get your fucking hands off me. And what the hell does Bianca getting kidnapped have to do with me? You have some nerve asking that. Donald's eyes were bloodshot. Clearly, he hadn't slept all night. If you hadn't said all that cruel shit last night, Bianca never would have run out crying and gotten snatched by our enemies. This whole shit show is all because of you. You're gonna help us switch her back right fucking now. The front door slammed open. Edward appeared, his face ghost white. He looked up at us on the stairs. Is Bianca back yet? Donald grabbed my arm and yanked it up. No, but the kidnapper said they'd make a trade, 1 for 1. Since Serena's the reason Bianca got taken in the first place, it's time for her to make things right. Let go of me. I slapped Donald hard across the face. You're just a bodyguard. How dare you put your hands on me? A red handprint bloomed on Donald's cheek, but his eyes showed zero regret. Sorry, Miss Ferrari, but this isn't your call anymore. For Bianca's sake, we'll risk everything, even going against you. He grabbed my arm and turned to his brother. Edward, get over here and help. My limited combat skills might hold up against Donald for a few rounds. But Edward? No way in hell.
Slam.
I hit the floor hard. Edward's boot appeared in my line of vision. I struggled against Donald's grip, but the outcome now depended entirely on Edward. I looked up at him, desperation creeping into my voice. Edward, please help me. I'm begging you. He swallowed hard and closed his eyes. Sorry about that. Thud. Both brothers pinned me to the ground. On the way to meet the kidnappers, Edward rode with me in the back seat, keeping watch. You're reborn too. He broke the silence first. I shot him an icy look. And yet you're still treating me like absolute garbage.
He paused.
Then said quietly, I'm really sorry. Smack. My palm cracked across his cheek. Those bullshit words are the last thing I need from you. Not in our last life, and sure as hell not in this one. His face turned slightly to the side. Dark hair fell across his eyes, hiding his expression. I heard him say in a low voice, I promise this is the last time. His hand covered mine, gripping it tight. Just let me get her out safe, okay? One last thing, for old time's sake. After that, I'll do whatever it takes to come back for you. I couldn't help but laugh. What a load of crap. He grabbed my hand tighter. This is temporary, I promise. I won't let anything happen to you. The swap went down in some empty field outside town. Bianca and I walked past each other without a word. Suddenly, she broke into a run. Edward. Donald. I whipped around. Edward was the first to reach her, catching her in his arms. Donald worked quickly to cut her restraints. Edward held her so tight his hands were shaking. I could read his lips. I'm sorry. I failed to protect you. Something twisted in my chest, some emotion I couldn't name, even though I'd prepared myself not to matter to anyone. In the next second, a hand dragged me over, snapping me out of my thoughts. I tried to say something, but they'd already gagged me. Serena's POV. I'd been rotting in this hellhole for 3 days. My skin was covered in welts. There wasn't an inch left that hadn't been torn up by their whip. The head kidnapper roared and furious. Aren't you a fucking Ferrari? Where's the goddamn ransom money? 3 days and not a single cent. Are you even really their heiress? I let out a bitter laugh. The Ferrari family only had one real heiress. And it sure as hell wasn't me. Last chance. The guy walked over with a syringe. This stuff's gonna make everything hurt like hell. Call your family, and if they agree to wire the cash right now, I'll let you go. If not, well, let's just say we'll be sending your fingers home one by one.
What?
No, please don't. HHH. The liquid burned as it hit my bloodstream. My heart started racing. Make the call. They shoved the phone into my hands. I scrolled through my contacts. I tried Dad first. Voicemail. Then Steven. Nothing. Bianca wasn't picking up either. Edward. Hello. Edward. I heard his voice like finding a lifeline. You need to bring money now. They injected me with something, and they're gonna cut off my fingers. The music on his end was deafening, like he was at some club. I was confused. What? Where are you? Serena, it's Bianca's birthday party. Can't ruin it for her. My eyes widened. What the fuck does that mean? Just hang tight. After the party's over, I'll come get you. But if you don't come now, they're gonna. Serena, it's just one night. Don't be dramatic, okay? The kidnapper snorted, clearly not impressed. My voice cracked. But you promised you wouldn't let anything happen to me. Silence on the other end. Then, be patient, Serena. Just a little longer. The line went dead. Hello? Hello? Edward. I tried calling back, but the phone powered off. The kidnapper clicked his tongue. You sure you're actually a Ferrari? Fuck. What a waste of time. I wiped away my tears and slowly straightened up. The grief faded, replaced by something ice cold. Cut the act. Untie me. The guys who'd been acting all tough immediately straightened up and started cutting my ropes. Sorry for the inconvenience, Miss Ferrari. I tossed the ropes aside and turned to leave. Burn it down. Standing on the dock, I glanced back at the flames lighting up the sky. I wiped off the fake whip marks from my skin. A man on the boat reached out his hand to help me up. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could see a scar running down his cheek. I watched the flames and bid farewell to my former self. From this moment on, there was no more Serena Ferrari. From now on, I would become my own queen. Edward's POV. The bass from the speakers on the outdoor pavilion was a physical force, vibrating through the stone tiles beneath my boots and rattling the champagne. Flutes stacked on the silver trays. It was Bianca's 22nd birthday. The estate was draped in white orchids and silk streamers that caught the warm evening breeze off the Tyrrhenian Sea. Laughing voices, clinking crystal, and the soft, polished murmurs of Italy's high society rose in a collective hum of unearned privilege. But I couldn't hear any of it. The frantic, ragged gasp of Serena's voice was still echoing in my ears, louder than the speakers, louder than the heartbeat thudding against my ribs. Edward, you need to bring money, now. They injected me with something, and they're gonna cut off my fingers. I stared down at the screen of my phone. The call had disconnected 3 minutes ago. I had tried calling back instantly, only to be met with the flat, nasal drone of an automated operator. The number you've dialed is not in service. My thumb hovered over the screen, pressing the redial button again, and again, and again. The same automated voice. The same dead end. Edward, darling. There you are. Bianca's voice cut through my panic like glass. She materialized from the crowd, a vision in pale pink silk, her dark hair pinned back with diamond clips that sparkled under the fairy lights. Her eyes were bright, slightly glassy from the Prosecco, but she was smiling her trademark, fragile smile. Behind her, Donald hovered like a dark shadow, his broad shoulders squared, his gaze scanning the terrace with a hawk's vigilance. The caterers are about to bring out the cake, Bianca said, reaching out to wrap her hand around my forearm. Her grip was light, almost delicate, but it felt like a lead weight. You have to be there. Papa is going to make a speech, and I want my favorite protector right next to me. I have to go, I said. My voice sounded flat, hollowed out of all emotion. It was the tone I had used for 7 years when I pretended to be a silent shell of a boy, but now it was real. Bianca's smile faltered, her brow furrowing with a hint of petulance. Go? Now? But it's my birthday, Edward. The entire family is here. Stephen flew in from Milan just for this. It's Serena, I said, my chest tightening as I looked past her toward the darkened driveway where the security vehicles were parked. She called. The kidnappers, they're hurting her. They injected her with something. I need to take a team and go to the exchange point now. Bianca's expression didn't shift into horror or concern. Instead, a familiar, subtle shadow of resentment passed over her eyes, so quick that anyone else would have missed it. But I had watched her for 2 lifetimes. I knew every micro-expression she possessed. Serena again? Bianca sighed, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper so the nearby guests wouldn't hear. Edward, she's been gone for 3 days. If they really wanted a ransom, they would have contacted Papa or Stephen, not you. She's probably just trying to ruin my evening. You know how she is. She's always hated that Papa loves me more. She was crying, Bianca, I said, my teeth grinding together so hard my jaw ached. She was terrified. Donald stepped forward, his face darkening as he looked down at me. Listen to the lady, Edward. Serena's been pulling stunts since we were kids. Remember the scar? She probably staged the whole thing just to get a reaction out of you. You're our father's security detail. If you bolt now, it'll look like a security breach. It'll ruin the party. In our past life, I had believed them. I had believed that Serena was cold, calculating, and jealous. I had let myself believe that protecting Bianca was the ultimate duty, the only way to keep the family stable. And because of that belief, I had watched Serena drown. I had held her hand as the cold water took her, promising her that I would make it up to her in the next life. Now we were in the next life, and I had let Donald drag her into a swap. I had pinned her to the ground. I had allowed her to be taken by those animals, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself I would get Bianca safe first, and then come back for her. Just a little longer, I had told her. Be patient. But patience didn't stop a syringe. Patience didn't stop a blade. I don't care about the party, I said. I pulled my arm out of Bianca's grasp, with enough force to make her stumble back a step. Her eyes widened in genuine shock, not because of the movement, but because I had never, not once in either lifetime, prioritized anyone over her. Edward, she called out, her voice rising in a sharp, defensive note as I turned my back on her. If you leave right now, I'll tell Papa. I'll have him fire you. Let him, I muttered. I didn't look back. I sprinted toward the garage, my fingers fumbling with my car keys as the cold night air hit my face, carrying with it the faint, bitter scent of ozone and burning wood. Edward's POV. The drive to the abandoned shipping dock on the outskirts of the city usually took 40 minutes. I made it in 20. The Mercedes tore through the winding coastal roads, its tires shrieking against the asphalt as I pushed the engine to its absolute limit. In the passenger seat, my tactical radio crackled with static, the local police bands murmuring with reports of a massive structure fire near the industrial district. My stomach dropped into a cold, bottomless pit. By the time I pulled onto the gravel lot of the old warehouse, the sky was stained a violent, bruised orange. The fire was massive, roaring like a living beast against the dark backdrop of the sea. Columns of thick, black smoke choked the stars, carrying ash that drifted down like gray snow. 3 fire engines were already on the scene, their sirens wailing in a desperate, futile rhythm as crews dragged heavy hoses toward the blazing skeleton of the building. I threw the car into park and bolted before the engine had even stopped running. Hey,
Kid.
you can't go in there, a firefighter yelled, grabbing my shoulder as I tried to push past the yellow barrier tape. There's someone inside, I roared, twisting out of his grip with a clean, violent shoulder throw that sent him sprawling onto the wet gravel. Serena. Serena. The heat radiating from the structure was immense, blistering the skin of my face even from 50 yards away. The wooden beams of the roof were groaning, collapsing inward with massive, spark-showering thuds. There's no other way out of there, another firefighter shouted into his radio, his voice strained with panic. If she tried to run, the only option would have been jumping into the ocean. The current is too strong. Let me go. I have to. I fought desperately to leap toward the edge of the dock, my eyes scanning the dark, churning water below for any sign of a pale hand, a scrap of clothing, anything. But several pairs of hands suddenly grabbed my jacket, pinning my arms to my sides. Edward, stop. Look at the building. It's gone. I spun around, my vision blurred by sweat and tears of frustration, to see Donald. He had followed me, his face streaked with soot from the road, his chest heaving as he held me back with everything he had. Behind him, 2 of our family security guards lent their weight, dragging me away from the edge. Let go of me, Donald. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that tore at my throat. She's in there, or she's in the water. I have to get her. You can't save her. Donald yelled back, his grip tightening until my bones popped. Look at the flames, Edward. If she was inside, she was dead before the trucks even got here. The smoke alone would have killed her. I promised her. I howled, the weight of 2 lifetimes of failure crushing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. I told her I wouldn't let anything happen to her. I promised her in the water, Donald. I promised her. Snap out of it. Donald's fist caught me clean across the jaw. The force of the blow rattled my skull, sending me crashing to my knees on the wet asphalt. The metallic taste of blood burst in my mouth. I clutched my face, my breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps as I stared up at my older brother, through the dark strands of hair falling over my eyes. Donald stood over me, his hand trembling as he pulled back, chest heaving. You know how calculating Serena can be. How do you know she didn't fake her own death? What are you talking about? I whispered, my voice shaking. They haven't found a body or the kidnappers. Donald said, his voice rising as he doubled down on the lie, desperate to justify his own negligence, desperate to protect Bianca's birthday from being stained by tragedy. What if this is just another one of Serena's twisted schemes? She's probably getting off on watching you lose your shit. If you actually jump into that current, then she really will have played you like a fucking fool. I looked past him at the roaring inferno. The warehouse was completely engulfed. Now, the roof collapsing entirely in a spectacular eruption of gold and red. If Serena had faked it, where was she? How could she have escaped a locked warehouse surrounded by armed men? But as I stared at the flames, a cold, sickening realization began to take root in my chest. Serena wasn't like Bianca. She didn't weep prettily for attention. She didn't stage elaborate dramatics to gain our father's love. In our past life, she had quietly learned to fight, quietly suffered her scars, and quietly drowned while I took her life jacket. She hadn't faked this to play me. If she was gone, it was because I had let her go. I had hung up on her. I had chosen a birthday cake over her life. I pressed my forehead against the cold, wet gravel of the dock, the heat of the fire burning the back of my neck, and let out a silent, broken sob. I had failed her again. Serena's POV. Across the ocean, in a dimly lit room overlooking the rocky cliffs of Taormina, I watched the Ferrari stock prices plummet on my screen while swirling red wine in my glass. The digital ticker cast a soft, green and red glow across the leather sofa, reflecting off the dark wood of the desk where my laptop sat. The news had just broken in Italy. Tragic fire at dockside warehouse claims the life of Serena Ferrari, younger daughter of the Ferrari syndicate. The market, always sensitive to instability in family-run conglomerates, was reacting beautifully, with Stephen locked in a bitter legal battle over offshore accounts and Dad refusing to step down despite his failing health. The sudden death of the younger daughter, coupled with rumors of a botched kidnapping, had sent investors into a panic. The Ferrari stock was down 18% in 12 hours.
It was a bloodbath.
And I had front row seats. Sitting across from me, his long legs crossed elegantly at the ankle, was the most powerful mafia boss in Sicily, Lorenzo Rossetti. He was a man built of shadow and hard angles. His dark suit was tailored to perfection, hiding the lethal frame beneath, but it was his face that commanded attention. A thin, silver scar ran from his left temple down to his jawline, slicing through his cheek in a way that should have ruined his handsome features, but instead gave him the look of a dangerous, fallen angel. "Congratulations, Mr. Rossetti," I said, raising my glass in a mock toast.
Soon.
"The Ferraris will be crushed under your heel." Lorenzo's lips curved into a slow, appreciative smile. He picked up his own glass, the amber liquid inside catching the light. Never imagined the spare Ferrari daughter would go after her own family this ruthlessly. "Color me impressed." "You're giving me too much credit, Mr. Rossetti," I replied, leaning back into the leather cushions. What kind of family would just abandon their daughter and sister to die? They made their choice 3 days ago, when they let those ropes bind me. I'm simply returning the favor. Lorenzo leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as his dark eyes locked onto mine. "Your father's spies are still combing the ashes of that warehouse. They found nothing but charred timber and melted steel. How did you get out?" "A queen always has an escape route," I said softly. The truth was simple. The kidnappers were a group of rogue mercenaries I had quietly put on my own payroll weeks ago using the funds I'd skimmed from the
Castellano account.
I had staged the entire kidnapping. The fake whip marks, the bruised skin, the desperate phone call to Edward. It was all a test. A final, definitive exam to see if anyone in that goddamn family had a shred of loyalty left. If Edward had come, if he had ignored Bianca's party and showed up at that warehouse, I might have spared him. I might have let him into my new world. But he didn't. He chose her. Again. So, I had my men set the warehouse on fire, boarded Lorenzo Rossetti's private yacht which had been waiting in the harbor, and sailed away into the dark. Serena Ferrari was dead, burned to ash in a watery grave. "You're a dangerous woman, Serena," Lorenzo murmured, his gaze lingering on the faint scar on my cheek. The one I had gotten at 10 years old, saving Bianca from an attacker she had practically run into. Unlike Donald, who looked at it with disgust, or Edward, who looked at it with pity, Lorenzo looked at it like it was a badge of honor. "I'm a practical woman, Mr. Rossetti," I corrected him. "We have a deal.
I
provide you with the financial backdoors, the offshore routing codes, and the Structural weaknesses of the Ferrari shipping lines. In exchange, you provide me with the resources to build my own empire. And when the Ferrari name is nothing but a footnote in history, I take my seat at the table. An empire of your own, Lorenzo mused, standing up and walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the black expanse of the sea. And what will you call this new kingdom of yours? I stood up, walking to join him at the glass. In the reflection, our scars lined up almost perfectly, two matching marks of survival, etched in blood. I don't need a name, I said, my voice cold and steady. They'll know who I am when the ground starts shaking beneath their feet. Serena's POV. The gala at the Palazzo Biscari in Catania was a display of old Sicilian wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from gilded ceilings, casting a warm, honeyed glow over the hundreds of guests dressed in velvet, silk, and diamonds. Lorenzo had insisted I attend. If you're going to rule, he had said, you must learn to walk among the wolves without showing your teeth. I wore a backless gown of midnight blue silk that clung to my curves, the fabric dark enough to hide the real scars on my shoulders, but elegant enough to draw every eye in the room. I had spent the last 2 hours playing the part of Lorenzo's mysterious consultant, speaking fluent Italian, charm dripping from my tongue like sweet poison. But as the night wore on, the heat of the ballroom and the stifling weight of the perfume became too much. I stepped out onto the terrace, breathing in the cool, salty sea air. Thought you came out here to sober up. What the hell took you so long? I looked up to see Lorenzo leaning against the stone balustrade, a burning cigarette held loosely between his fingers. His dark eyes were calculating, watching me with that quiet intensity that always made me feel like he was reading the pages of my mind. I took the silk handkerchief he offered, dabbing at the faint bead of sweat on my collarbone. Never thought Mr. Rossetti would come looking for me personally. Don't flatter yourself, he said, taking a drag from his cigarette and letting the smoke drift up into the night. I'm just curious, who were you meeting with? In the library earlier? I smiled, keeping my expression perfectly neutral. Should have known nothing gets
Past you.
Miss Ferrari, he said, stepping closer until the scent of his cologne, expensive tobacco and cedarwood, overshadowed the sea air. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr. Working with me requires absolute loyalty. Otherwise, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Ever since he'd caught me 3 days ago, digging into Rossetti Industries' encrypted shipping manifests, he'd been watching me like a hawk. But I couldn't exactly tell him I'd been investigating his own logistics networks because I didn't trust him either. In my world, blind trust was a disease that got you drowned. I reached up, placing my palm gently over his mouth, my fingers brushing against the rough stubble of his jaw and the smooth line of his scar. Relax, Lorenzo, I whispered, using his first name for the first time.
I
Definitely wasn't sneaking around meeting your mortal enemy. I was just checking the security logs. I like to know where the exits are. He raised an eyebrow, his lips brushing against my palm before I pulled my hand away. He didn't push further, but his gaze remained heavy, dark, and possessive. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my clutch. It was an encrypted alert from the security perimeter of the palazzo. My breath hitched. What is it? Lorenzo asked, his hand instantly dropping to the inside of his jacket where his holster sat. We have guests, I said, staring at the screen. The thermal cameras at the rear entrance of the palazzo had just picked up 3 heat signatures. They were moving with military precision, bypassing the outer guards with a familiarity that could only mean one thing. They knew our security protocols, because they were my father's men. They're here for me, I said, a cold thrill of anticipation rushing through my veins. Then let's go welcome them, Lorenzo replied, his smile turning sharp and predatory. Serena's POV. The ground floor of the palazzo's private wing was dead silent, save for the dripping of water from an overturned ornamental fountain. When I reached the marble corridor, the first thing I saw was bodyguards, scattered everywhere like broken dolls, blood pooling on the white marble floor. Lorenzo's men had put up a fight, but the intruders had been faster, cleaner, and entirely ruthless. And there, standing in the center of the foyer with his gun drawn, was Edward. He looked different. The boyish softness of his face was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. His clothes were rumpled, his hair damp from the rain. Outside, and his eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a frantic, desperate madness. Stop, I threw myself in front of Lorenzo just as Edward spun around his weapon, raising in a clean, practiced motion. The barrel pressed right against my forehead, cold steel against my skin. Serena? Both men froze. Edward stared at me in absolute disbelief. His hand shook, the gun trembling against my skin as he looked at my face, alive, breathing, untouched by the fire that had haunted his dreams for weeks. You're alive, he whispered, his voice cracking a raw, bleeding
sound.
I saw the warehouse go up. I thought you were. I thought I lost you. Again. Move the gun, Edward, I said, my voice as cold and flat as a winter lake. Serena, please, he begged, tears spilling over his lashes, tracking lines through the soot on his cheeks. He's a Rossetti. He's our enemy. He's using you.
Come with me. I can protect you now.
I've built my own team. I've got the money. You'd rather die than let me shoot him? Edward's smile turned cold and bitter as he saw how closely I stood to Lorenzo, how my body shielded the Sicilian dawn from his line of fire. I'd rather die than let a dog bite my partner, I replied, my eyes narrowing. You had your chance to protect me, Edward. You had 7 years in our last life, and you had 3 days in this one. You chose Bianca's birthday cake. You chose her tears. You chose to pin me to the ground so she could walk free. I did it to keep you safe. He screamed, the agony in his voice echoing off the high stone walls. In the last life, you died because you were the heiress. I thought if I kept you out of the business, if I let Bianca take the spotlight, the enemies would go after her instead of you. I wanted you to have a normal life, Serena. I wanted you to be free. I stared at him, a hollow laugh escaping my lips. So, you decided to treat me like garbage? You let Donald abuse me? You let them trade my life for hers? All to keep me safe? I stepped forward, forcing the barrel of his gun tighter against my forehead. That's not protection, Edward. That's just cowardice dressed up as sacrifice. Lorenzo tried to pull me behind him, his hand gripping my waist, but Edward, slowly, agonizing face muscle by muscle, lowered his weapon. The barrel dropped, pointing toward the blood-stained floor. He looked at me, his eyes dead, his spirit entirely broken. Take her and go, Edward whispered to Lorenzo, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain lashing against the windows. Edward, I was stunned. Get out of here, he said, turning his back on us, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had just crashed down on them. Before I change my mind. Lorenzo kept his eyes locked on Edward as he guided me backward toward the exit, his arm firmly around my waist. Just as we reached the heavy oak door, Edward called out, his voice cracking. Serena. I paused, but I didn't turn back. The distance was too great for him to see me, clearly in the shadows of the corridor. I can't protect you anymore, he said. You never did, I replied. I turned and left, stepping out into the cold Sicilian rain, leaving the ghosts of my past behind in the dark. Serena's POV. The fallout from the Palazzo raid was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours, Lorenzo's network had dismantled 3 of the remaining Ferrari shipping routes in Upper Italy. With the market already in a tailspin over my death, the sudden loss of their primary logistics lines was the final nail in the coffin. The Ferrari name was hemorrhaging money, and Stephen's offshore accounts were frozen under suspicion of money laundering. I sat in the study of Lorenzo's villa, the glowing screens of my monitors, casting a cool blue light over my face. The financial spreadsheets were a beautiful mess of red ink. The Ferraris were bankrupt. They just didn't know it yet. You've been staring at those numbers for 5 hours. Lorenzo's voice drifted from the doorway. He was dressed in a simple black shirt, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark ink of his tattoos. He carried a plate of sliced figs and prosciutto, placing it quietly on the edge of my desk. I'm finishing them, I said, not looking up. By tomorrow morning, Stephen will have to sell his remaining shares in the trust fund just to keep the family estate from being repossessed by the bank. And Bianca. I paused, a cold smile touching my lips. Bianca's precious annual dividends will be worth less than the paper they're printed on. Lorenzo watched me, a quiet amusement in his eyes. And what about the younger, Cross brother? He hasn't left the city. My fingers paused over the keyboard. Edward? My men spotted him outside the harbor yesterday, Lorenzo said, leaning against the desk. He's been sitting in a rented sedan, watching the villa. He's not armed. He's just waiting. Let him wait, I said coldly. He's nothing but a ghost. But that night, as the villa fell silent and the moon rose high over the sea, I found myself walking down the stone path toward the iron gates of the estate. The night air was cool, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine and the sharp tang of sea salt. Sure enough, a silver sedan was parked under the shadow of a wild olive tree, just past the gates. The door opened as soon as my heels clicked on the gravel. Edward stepped out. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness. He didn't look like the lethal bodyguard who could put a trainer flat on his ass in 3 moves. He looked like a beggar. "Serena," he whispered, taking a step toward the gate before my icy glare frozen him in his tracks. "Why are you here, Edward?" "I wanted to explain," he said, his hands clenching into fists at his sides as if trying to keep them from shaking. "In our first life, when the ship went down, I didn't want to take your life jacket. I swear to God, Serena, I
Didn't.
But you did," I said. "Your first words to me were a death sentence." "Bianca's life jacket was defective," he cried, his voice breaking in the quiet
Night.
"Donald had tampered with it. He wanted to make sure Bianca would take yours so you would drown. He hated you, Serena. He hated you because of the scar, because of the way Papa looked at you when you succeeded." I tried to stop him, but I was too late. When I realized what he'd done, the water was already coming in. I thought if I gave Bianca your jacket, Donald would
Save you.
He was a lifeguard, Serena. I thought he would jump in for you. I stared at him through the iron bars of the gate. The truth was a twisted, ugly thing, but it didn't change the outcome. "And yet, you gripped my hand," I said softly. "You watched me slip beneath the
Waves.
You told me you'd make it up to me in the next life." "I wanted to," he sobbed, dropping to his knees on the gravel road, his head bowing against the cold iron of the gate. "I wanted to make it right, but when I woke up back in our father's office, everything went wrong. Bianca chose me."
You.
Shrugged and let her have me. "You didn't fight for me, Serena. You didn't even look at me." "Why should I have?" I asked. "I spent my entire first life trying to save a boy who was pretending to be broken just to avoid me. I spent 2 hours every day telling jokes to a brick wall. I learned to fight so you wouldn't be sent away. And in the end, you let me drown anyway. Why would I ever fight for you again?" "I'm sorry," he whispered, pressing his forehead against the cold iron bars. "I'm so sorry." "Go home, Edward," I said, turning my back on him. "Go back to Bianca. She's the one who needs a dog to weep at her feet."
I've already learned to walk on my
own. Edward's POV. The gravel dug into my knees through my trousers, but I couldn't feel the pain. I listened to the soft, rhythmic click of Serena's heels fading back up the stone path, each step a hammer blow to my chest, driving the nails deeper into my coffin. The iron gate stood between us, a cold, black barrier that felt as permanent as the grave. I looked down at my hands. These were the hands that had pinned her to the
ground in the hallway.
These were the hands that had held her down on the way to the exchange. I had told myself it was for her own good. Just let me get her out safe, okay? After that, I'll do whatever it takes to come back for you. What a pathetic lie. What a cowardly, self-deluding excuse. I had been reborn with the knowledge of a lifetime, with the combat skills of a seasoned killer, and the mind of a grown man, and yet I had let myself be manipulated by the same old patterns. I had let Donald's loud, aggressive loyalty and Bianca's soft, tearful helplessness dictate my actions. I had been so terrified of Serena dying the same way she had before that I had pushed her into the very hands of the wolves. But Serena wasn't a victim anymore. She hadn't spent this second life weeping or begging. She had taken the cards she was dealt, rewritten the rules of the game, and built her own throne. And she had done it without me. Edward. I looked up to see Donald standing under the shadow of the olive tree, his face dark, his arms crossed over his chest. He had followed me here from the hotel. "She's gone, Edward," Donald said, his voice flat, devoid of the smug confidence. He'd head back in Italy. "The Ferrari family is finished.
Stephen is talking to
the prosecutors in Milan. Papa had a stroke this morning. He's in the hospital, under guard. And Bianca." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Bianca's been crying for hours. She wants us to take her to Switzerland. She says we have to protect her." "Protect her from what?" I asked, standing up slowly, my legs stiff, my heart a hollow, empty shell. "From Serena," Donald said, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his eyes.
"She's
the one behind the Rossetti takeover." She's the one who leaked the offshore
Codes.
She's destroying us, Edward. We have to stop her. I let out a dry, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Stop her? I looked at my brother, the man who had tampered with a life jacket. In another life, the man who had looked at Serena's scar with disgust in this.
1.
We didn't stop the kidnappers, Donald. We didn't stop the fire. We didn't stop ourselves from treating her like trash. How the hell are we going to stop, eh?
Queen?
We have to try, Donald said, reaching out to grab my shoulder. For Bianca's sake. I pulled away from him, my gaze lingering on the dark villa up the hill where a single window was lit with a warm, steady light. You go, I said softly. Go protect your princess, Donald. I'm staying here. Edward, don't be a fool. I'm already a fool, I said. I've been a fool for 2 lifetimes. But this time, I'm going to watch the fire burn. Serena's POV. The Ferrari estate in Rome was a monument to a dying empire. The manicured lawns were overgrown, the heavy marble statues stained with soot and rain, and the high wrought iron gates stood open, their security locks bypassed by Lorenzo's digital strike team. The family that had once ruled Italy's underworld with an iron fist was now nothing but a cornered animal, waiting for the final blow. Lorenzo walked beside me, his long black coat billowing in the cold wind, his hand resting casually on the hilt of his cane. Behind us, 20 heavily armed Rossetti soldiers moved in a silent, lethal formation, clearing the rooms with the efficiency of a scalpel. When we reached the grand salon, the scene was almost pathetic. My father sat in his high-backed leather chair, his face pale and drawn, one side of his mouth drooping slightly from the stroke he'd suffered days ago. Stephen stood by the window, his expensive suit rumpled, a glass of half-empty whiskey trembling in his hand. And Bianca. She was huddled on the velvet sofa, her face red and swollen from crying, clutching a silk pillow to her chest as if it could protect her from the assault. Rifles pointed at her head. Serena, Bianca gasped, her eyes widening in a mixture of terror and desperate hope as I stepped into the room. You're alive. Oh my God. Serena, they told us you died in the fire.
I was so worried about you.
She scrambled off the sofa, her pink silk skirt rustling as she ran toward me, her arms outstretched for a sisterly embrace. Stop right there, Lorenzo said, his cane coming down with a sharp, echoing crack on the marble floor. 2 soldiers instantly stepped forward, their weapons raising to block her path. Bianca froze, her eyes darting from the guns to my face, her lower lip trembling. On cue. Serena, please tell them to put the guns down. We're family.
We
love you. Family? I walked past her, my heels clicking softly on the marble, and stood before my father's chair. The old Don looked up at me, his eyes clouded with age and sickness, but there was still a spark of the old, arrogant tyrant inside. You traitor, he wheezed, his voice thick and slurred. You aligned with the Rossetti. You sold out your own blood. My blood sold me first, Papa, I said softly, leaning down until my face was level with his. You knew Edward wasn't autistic. You knew he was a lethal weapon, but you let him pretend so Bianca could have the better choice. You let Donald treat me like garbage because of this face. I touched the scar on my
cheek.
The scar I got saving your precious princess. Serena, please. Stephen cut in, his voice cracking with desperation. We can make a deal. I have offshore accounts in Panama, 30 million, it's yours. Just let us go. Let Bianca go. The Panama accounts were seized by the federal police 3 hours ago. Stephen, I said, not even looking at him. I sent them the routing numbers. Myself. You have nothing left. No money, no power, no allies. How can you be so cruel? Bianca sobbed, dropping to her knees and grabbing the hem of my coat. I'm your sister, Serena. I never wanted any of this. I was just a child when you got that scar. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't your fault that you pushed me into the attacker? I asked, looking down at her pretty, untouched face. It wasn't your fault that you took my life vest on the cruise ship while I drowned. Bianca froze, her eyes widening in absolute terror. What cruise ship?
What are you talking about?
She didn't remember. She hadn't been reborn. To her, my words were nothing but the ravings of a madwoman. But the terror in her eyes was real, and that was enough for me. It doesn't matter, I said, pulling my coat out of her grasp. Lorenzo, take them. Wait. The heavy oak doors of the salon burst open, and Donald ran into the room, his gun drawn, his face wild with desperation. "Let her go, Serena," Donald roared, pointing his weapon directly at my chest. "I'll kill you. I swear to God, I'll kill you." Serena's POV. "Donald, no." Bianca screamed, scrambling backward toward the safety of the
Sofa.
The room erupted into a tense, breathless standoff. 20 Rossetti soldiers instantly locked their sights on Donald, their red lasers dancing across his chest and forehead. Lorenzo didn't even flinch. He simply stood beside me, his dark eyes watching Donald with a cold, clinical detachment. "Drop the weapon, boy," Lorenzo said, his voice quiet but carrying the absolute weight of authority. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options." "I don't care," Donald yelled, his hands shaking as he kept his gun pointed at
Me.
"She destroyed everything. She ruined the family. She's a monster." "I'm a survivor, Donald," I said, stepping past Lorenzo's protective arm. "And you're just a loyal dog who doesn't realize his owner has already sold him out." "Serena, please." Another voice cut through the tension. Edward stepped into the room. He didn't have a weapon. His hands were raised, his head bowed as he walked slowly between the soldiers, his gaze locked entirely on me. "Edward," Donald called out, his eyes flickering with hope. "Help me. We can get Bianca out of here." "Put the gun down, Donald," Edward said, his voice flat, exhausted.
What? No.
"We have to protect her." "She's not worth it," Edward whispered, his eyes finally shifting to Bianca, who was cowering behind the sofa, her eyes darting toward the exits, completely ignoring Donald's desperate stand. "Look at her, Donald. She's not looking at
You.
She's looking at the doors. The moment the shooting starts, she'll run over your corpse to save herself, just like she did before." Donald's face paled, his gaze drifting back to Bianca. He saw the truth in her eyes, the raw, selfish survival instinct that had always been hidden behind her pretty fragile smile. His gun hand trembled, dropping an inch. "No, no. She loves me," Donald whispered. "She loves your protection, Donald," I said. "She doesn't love you." Suddenly, my father let out a choked, wet gasp. His hand fumbled beneath his heavy blanket, and before anyone could react, he pulled a small, silver derringer from the pocket of his chair. He didn't point it at Lorenzo. He didn't point it at the soldiers.
He pointed it directly at me.
"You ruined my family," the old Don wheezed, his finger tightening on the trigger.
Bang.
The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space of the salon. I didn't feel the impact. Instead, a heavy weight slammed into my chest, throwing me backward onto the marble floor. I looked up, my breath caught in my throat, to see Edward collapsing over me. His dark hair fell across his eyes, his face pale, a bright bloom of crimson spreading rapidly across the front of his gray shirt. "Edward!" Donald screamed, dropping his weapon and rushing forward, but two soldiers instantly tackled him to the ground, pinning his arms behind his back. I stared at Edward, my hands coming up instinctively to press against his chest, the warm, sticky blood spilling through my fingers. "Why?" I whispered, my voice shaking with a sudden, confusing rush of emotion. "Why did you do that?" Edward looked down at me, his eyes clouded with pain, but a small, genuine smile touched his lips, the first smile I had ever seen on his face in 2 lifetimes. "I told you," he gasped, his breath coming in shallow, wet rattles. "I'll make it up to you in the next life." "You idiot," I said, tears finally burning my eyes, though I refused to let them
fall.
"This is the next life. Then, I guess we're even," he whispered, his head slumped against my shoulder, his hand slipping from my grasp, cold and still. I sat there on the bloody marble floor of my father's salon, holding the body of the boy who had spent a lifetime silent, who had spent a lifetime failing me, and who had finally, in the end, kept his promise. Serena's POV. The Ferrari estate was sold to a development conglomerate 3 months later. Stephen was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security prison in Milan for financial fraud and conspiracy. My father passed away in the prison ward of the Rome hospital 2 weeks after the trial, his name stripped of all its former
glory.
And Bianca, with her trust fund gone and her reputation ruined, she had fled to a small town in Switzerland, living on a modest stipend I quietly funneled to her through an anonymous account. It wasn't mercy. It was the ultimate punishment. For a girl who had lived her entire life in the glittering spotlight of high society, being entirely forgotten was a fate worse than death. Donald had disappeared into the underworld, a broken man with no master and no
Purpose.
I didn't care enough to look for him. I stood on the terrace of the Rossetti Villa in Sicily, the warm evening breeze. Off the sea rustling the hem of my black silk dress. The Mediterranean was a vast, deep blue, sparkling under the golden rays of the setting sun. The merger is complete, Lorenzo's voice drifted from behind me. He walked out, onto the terrace, 2 glasses of red wine in his hands. He handed one to me, his fingers brushing against mine. "And the board?" I asked, taking a sip of the rich, dark liquid. "They voted unanimously," he replied, a slow, appreciative smile curving his lips. "You are the new CEO of Rossetti Ferrari Logistics. The entire shipping network is yours, Serena." I looked out over the water, my fingers tracing the thin, silver scar on my
Cheek.
I had changed the ending. I had stepped out of the path of the victim, out of the shadow of the forgotten daughter, and claimed my own destiny. The scars that had once been a source of revulsion and pity were now the very symbols of my power. Lorenzo stepped closer, his arm wrapping around my waist, his chest warm against my back as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. "They call you the scarred queen in Milan," he murmured, his lips brushing against the side of my neck. I smiled, settling back into his strength, feeling the steady, uncomplicated beat of his heart against my shoulder. "Let them call me whatever they want," I said softly. "As long as they remember who wears the crown."